I am back with part 3 of my OWLS reading wrap-up. Quick side note before I get into this video, I hit 100 subscribers and I just wanted to say thank you so much for subscribing. It's really not about the numbers for me, but it is really cool and it just feels like validation for the work I've been putting into my channel over the last 6 months, and I absolutely love having you all here, and I hope that you will leave me some comments so that we can have a chat and so I can get to know you all a bit better. So thank you very much, and getting into the video. So first off, I finished, or read, volume 2 of Monster by Naoki Urasawa. This I read for the History of Magic exam, the prompt for which was to read a book that was 10 years old, and it was published in 2008, which is just about 10 years, actually 11 years old. This, like I mentioned, is volume 2. I also read volume 1 for my Transfiguration exam, so I will link that wrap up right here. I'm not necessarily going to tell you too much about what goes on in this volume, but essentially this series follows a Japanese doctor named Dr. Tenma who is living in Germany and practicing neurosurgery in a German hospital post-World War II. And when there are a number of serial killings involving a couple of his colleagues, he gets caught up in the hunt for the serial killer. And so really what this series is mystery thriller, because there are also some supernatural elements that make it slightly more on the thriller side of things, which really isn't a genre that I read very often at all, because I tend to find mystery thriller type books a little bit stressful. But I mentioned in my other video that there's not so much tension building in this one. It's more based on intrigue, and the fantastical elements that are included because of the supernatural elements of the story make it a lot easier for me to get on with. Plus the format, because it's manga, there's not as much text to work with in terms of that suspense building, and so it just doesn't feel quite so tense, which for me is a really good thing because that level of tension in mystery thrillers really stresses me out. But it is something to bear in mind if you are typically a mystery thriller reader. This isn't necessarily going to be quite the same thing. I really did enjoy this second volume, not as much as volume 1 because there wasn't as much medicine in this one, and that was a big part of the reason that I liked volume 1 so much. But I do like the characters and I am interested to see where this is going to go. I think there are another 6 or 7 volumes after this one, so I am looking forward to picking those up, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I picked up was A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid, Kemmerer, and this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, which meant that it qualified me to pass the Ancient Runes exam. Like I said, this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and although I've never read the original Beauty and the Beast, I have seen the Disney film. However, I do know that the Disney film does take some pretty big liberties in terms of deviation from the original story, and I have heard that this one is slightly more true to that original. I would recommend checking out Murphy Napier, who did a vlog whilst she was reading this, and I'm sure that it will be in her end of the month wrap up as well, in case you're interested in any comparisons between this and the original, which I can't give you because I haven't read it, the original I mean. But in this we follow Harper, who is our Belle, and Wren, who is our Beast, and it is told in a dual perspective, so you'll have one chapter from Harper's perspective and one from Wren's perspective and so on, which I quite liked as a writing style because it really gives us more insight into Wren's character, which isn't something necessarily that you get too much in the Disney film, at least. Harper is a very almost feminist character, and she also suffers from cerebral palsy, so she is very keen to not allow her cerebral palsy to get in her way, and her particular presentation is fairly mild on the spectrum of how cerebral palsy can affect people. And although I don't suffer from cerebral palsy and I don't know anybody who does, I do quite often work with people who do, and so I have seen a number of different types of presentation with that condition, and so I did feel that this was fairly good representation. But if the reader hadn't been told that Harper suffers from cerebral palsy, then they may not have necessarily known. That's not a criticism, it's just an observation. So Harper is very strong-willed and she doesn't let her cerebral palsy get in her way. Whereas Ren is slightly more the traditional sort, and that rubs Harper up the wrong way initially. But love blooms as love does in Beauty and the Beast, and it was a romance that I could really get behind. It was a nice, fun, light, easy read that with a really fast-paced plot that I managed to speed through relatively quickly, and I really enjoyed it and I would recommend it, and I did give it 4 out of 5 stars. And the final book I'm going to wrap up in this video is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, which is a sci-fi book set in the future and therefore qualifies me to pass the Devination exam, which was to read a book set in the future, perhaps unsurprisingly. Like I mentioned, this is sci-fi and it's set in a future where the human race have explored the universe and discovered all the other planets that are out there and other species of aliens, and we meet a number of those very interesting species aboard a ship called the Wayfarer. Now, I'm not going to get into what it is the Wayfarer does in any great detail because there is a lot of physics and a lot of tech at the beginning portion of this book, which I must admit is not my forte, and I did struggle with it just slightly. But it's not so complex that I couldn't get my head around it at all. It just made the beginning portion of the book a little bit of a slower read for me. But essentially, they make expressways in the universe. I'm just going to put it like that. Anyway, so we follow the crew. There are a number of humans on the crew, but there are also various alien species as well that we meet and get to know. And it's also quite episodic, so that's something to be aware of. Each chapter could almost be its own short story with its own defined beginning, middle and end, and each of those chapters really has its own moral of the story, and all of those morals are very much based in things that are very translatable to our own lives. This deals with questions around culture, race, religion, sexuality, ethics, immigration, all sorts of things, and they're all dealt with through the guise of interspecies relations, read alien relations, and intergalactic politics and travel, which makes it really, really interesting. But I found that the themes themselves were really cleverly dealt with, and it made it an incredibly interesting book to read, and one that really makes you question things in everyday life, which was great. But a word of caution to you plot-driven readers, this is not a plot-driven book. Although there is that overarching plot that keeps it all together, like I said, it's very episodic, and each chapter kind of has its own plot point, but really the book is an exploration of all of those themes and is based very much on character development. So if you're a character driven reader, this is great because there are some amazing and really lovable characters in this, but if you're a plot driven reader, just bear that in mind. I do want to read the rest of the trilogy. Sadly, as it turns out, the rest of the trilogy are companion books, so we don't necessarily follow the same characters, which is a shame because I will miss them, and so it's the kind of book that I will probably reread at some point just to spend some more time with the characters that we experience in here. I really did enjoy it and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And that's it for this wrap up. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like this from me, then do think about hitting that subscribe button, and I hope to see you here again soon. Thanks! Bye!